Scott on there? Scott, are you there?
Well,
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Point of order, have we?
yeah,
met
well,
the
no, you know what, can we just stop for a
Sorry.
second? Your point of order,
Point of order is, have we met the compliance with the Brown Act?
in the fact that he's,
Okay, it's posted.
yes, he got instructions that he would have the agenda posted?
Yes, it's all been done
Excellent. Just
according to
wanted
law.
to make it
Yes, you
clear.
bet.
Yes, yes. All right, roll call.
Director Davidson?
Here.
Director Radaman, present by
Here.
teleconference? Director, thank you. Director Underhill?
Here,
And Director Mills?
Present.
And Director Strange?
Present.
okay. Item number 2, public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. We have public comment today.
We'll give it to the board clerk.
I have a
pass it.
copy. She'll-
Yeah.
She'll pass it on.
Oh, you'll pass them out, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Preston, Hathaway Pines. I'm here today to speak to the wild and scenic problem that we have and to encourage this board to do all they can to put it away. I have suggestions that we get McClintock's support, since he's the chair now of the federal lands. And in the past, he's worked with me on other projects I've been involved in and land use, and he's been really cooperative, absolutely. Lundgren wouldn't do anything for us. I think it would be a good idea to combine our efforts with Tuolumne and Amador counties, which I visited and talked with supervisors there, because if Marita would have won, they were going to go after the Stanislaw for WNS. She made no bones about it. And the supervisor over there were just a little worried, because they have real water problems in Tuolumne County. It might not be a bad idea to hook up with the El Dorado and Amador Forest Forum, if you know about them. They're in the fight, for sure, and they're organized. At the bottom of those flyers that I passed out, you'll see a website called defendruralamerica.com. I would advise you to look at that. It's put on by a guy named Kirk McKenzie, who's traveled all over the western United States fighting for our water rights. And when you go to that site, look up frogs and toads. Sounds silly, doesn't it? It's the spotted owl on steroids. It'll shut down 1.88 million acres in the Sierras, and that would be us. Grazing, mining, logging, big no-no. Recreation, big no-no. They're using the Endangered Species Act here again, which is absolutely ridiculous, to stop any kind of growth. I understand that locally there was another dam project stopped of the raising of a dam. I haven't got the particulars yet. You guys know about it?
It's just public comment at this time. We can't really have a discussion about anything.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it's in the news. Also, Frank Bigelow, we need to support his bill 142 and make it even stronger. I have behested the supervisors to rescind the old vote, and that will be happening. And I can appreciate what you guys have done in your opposition to the WNS. Well, I think everything else there is just self-explanatory. Hope you don't get too bored reading it. I think there's some duplication because I combine several parts and pieces, and in my dotage I tend to screw things up. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
George Fry. I have two things. Were there any extra copies of the document that was passed out to you?
Give me yours. Give me yours. I have it.
Thank you. Number two is the contract for the legal counsel for the water district. Is that contract a public document? And if so, I'd like to have a copy of it. Thank you.
My name is Peter Reyes from the 5th District. I've given you some writings the last board meeting for your consideration. Hopefully it can be taken care of in the House for a certain amount of time to reply to it. And hopefully we can take care of it in-house instead of bringing in some other agency, I don't care, from a state bar association, the district attorney, and et cetera, or even private entities. Maybe the results will be the same, but from my perspective as a ratepayer, and I think in behalf of your new manager, those things should be straightened out. If it's not, don't make it forced upon you, please. I'd much rather see things like that cleared up in-house among yourself and come back with a proper way to remedy it. The other point is that I believe George brought it up. Association with some water district nearby, and I bought it from the Board of Supervisors there. As a taxpayer, property owner payer, property tax payer, rate payers, and et cetera, somehow this got to be straightened out because the Tuolumne County Water District, this agency paid $13,000. The Board of Supervisors paid $13,000. Even Murphy's district paid almost $800. And so basically, as a taxpayer, and I'll be diplomatic about it, kind of shortchanged because nothing become of it. And because I took the time to read the coordination that we spent, as a taxpayer, I spent $27,000, 16 from you and the Board of Supervisors, and almost 800 from Murphy's. Give it to Tuolumne County Water District, which is not exactly on top of the credibility range, to coordinate how to get a grant. And that's wonderful. It's great. But it never been disclosed. And it took a lot of digging to find out what was the condition to be considered, and emphasizing considered, a grant. But it was some gentleman, and we sent a not exactly diplomatic letter to tell him what he can do with it. Local, state, and federal. If you get into the detail, what the federal requirement was to be considered for a grant, was to me was very disturbing. It was never publicized, never disclosed. So the taxpayer got, and plus, to get a seat on this committee, or group, whatever you want to call it, there was a number of so-called nonprofit stakeholders, never really identified who were the nonprofit stakeholders. For $100, they had a voting right in there. Now, I'm not too good about turning my cheek on these issues, but please, don't let it happen again. It's not fair to your constituents, because they got paid. They paid $13,000 both as a property owners in a county, and you paid as a ratepayer and a property owner also to another water agency nearby county. So they got kind of shortchanged twice over. So I would hopefully consider it in the future. Thank you. Let's keep things in the house. It's a lot cheaper that way. Thank you.
Any further public comment?
Could I get a copy of my stuff? I forgot to save one for myself.
It's gonna cost you 50 cents a copy.
No more public comment? Okay, we'll go to item number 3, the consent agenda. Item 3A, proposed change to board meeting date in February 2015.
Move for acceptance.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excuse me, point of order.
Oh, public comment.
Maybe someday this board will grasp it. And I hope that the general manager and the legal counsel will help this board grasp it. Before you make a motion or a second, you have to bring it to the public. I don't know how many times I have to bash my lips up and down to get it done correctly. It's a violation of the Brown Act not to do it.
Has nothing to do with Brian.
I'm sorry, George, that was my fault.
No, it's not.
Yes, yes,
It's
it
not
was-
that is not the case. It's Robert's Rules of Order, and there's nothing to discuss if there isn't a motion and a second. We don't have anything on
The table.
for anybody to discuss until there's a motion and a second. If you really want to follow the Robert's Rules of Order.
That's it.
You make a motion, you make a second, and then it's
Then-
open for discussion.
Right.
Otherwise, there is no discussion.
Well, this is the only elected board that is doing it the way Mr. Davidson is saying. Every other board in this county, they put it out for public comment first, to get the information, to bring it back to the board members, so that the board members have all of the information in which to make a decision. Because there may be something that the public says that's important and germane to.
Right, George, and I totally understand, but no decision is made with a first and a second. Decisions are made when a first and a second is made, discussion is had, and then a vote is carried. The first and the second do not mean a thing until we actually vote. But we don't vote or even discuss things, or typically we're not supposed to. And I would say that the other agencies are very lax in the way they handle bringing things to a vote. But
Well, I disagree, and I would ask that the general manager and the legal counsel that you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars to make that determination.
I'd like,
This is the only board.
okay, let's hear from General Manager.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is kind of a continuation of a conversation we had last board meeting about items on the consent calendar, and if there would be public discussion on that. The consent calendar is, I mean, it's typically you don't have public comment on the consent calendar. But if there's a desire for discussion and to engage in that, then it would be appropriate to pull those items and to put them on the discussion calendar. As the direction that you gave last meeting, if that's something that the public has a desire to have one of these items discussed, and so that they can comment on it, if they would to approach a board member before the meeting and ask that they pull the item, that would be the approach that would be recommended. Certainly pulling items from the agenda off consent to put on discussion would be an action for the board to take. And again, if the public has a desire for that, that's certainly something you can approach one of the electeds and ask them to do that.
I understand.
I respect the general manager's comments, but the point of it is that this is a public meeting. And to go to a director before the meeting takes away the transparency.
And Madam Chair, alternatively, someone could certainly raise the issue during public comment. If there's a desire to have a particular item pulled, that could be a comment as to the form of the agenda that's made during public comment.
is this a change that we've made? Because in the past, we've had, it seems like there's a language on our agenda that said any member of the board or public would like to pull an item on the consent, now's the time to do that. But I think he's talking on a bigger issue. He's talking about in general. He wants public to comment before we make any motions. And, you know, typically we're here to listen to staff, because staff are bringing us items to vote on, and then we have a discussion, then public chimes in, and then we can make a decision after those steps are made. So I think George is not just about the consent, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is not a consent agenda issue. This is every single thing we vote on, you want to have a chance to comment before we make a motion in a second. Because you think it's appropriate to the Brown Act. That's what you said. You said it was a Brown Act issue, which it's absolutely not.
Excuse me, I misspoke about that, okay?
That's rather true.
My point is that it's important to have transparency. This board has had a real challenge in the past in terms of the public. And I'm going to continue to come to these meetings and make sure, as one public member, that things are done appropriately.
That's great. We appreciate it.
Madam Chair, maybe this would be appropriate for me to go offline with Ms. Fry, and we can discuss this. The goal of transparency absolutely is our obligation. There's some things here as far as the form of the agenda and just the order of which proceeding through action. I mean, there's a reason why some things are on discussion calendar, which include a full vetting and a public comment opportunity, as well as there's the public comment period in advance of that, which we just went through. And then there's reasons why the recommendation is for the board, and I know that's what the president had, which you had called for at the last meeting, is that if there are to be items that are pulled off the consent, that happens by the board to do that, because again, that's a decision for the board to make as to the form of the agenda. I mean, only you can adopt the form of the agenda and to take action, formally take action on these items. Again, bottom line, we want to have the maximum amount of public input and transparency, obviously, but there is a reason to have things on consent, because as we can see right now, we're well into this meeting, and we've got Brent here, and he's only here for a limited period of time, and we haven't started that meaningful discussion yet, so.
And so, as the general manager indicated, if you would like to talk to him offline, that would be fine, George, but right now, we have things to do.
No, I understand that.
Okay,
My point, once again, is the fact that anything that is on a consent agenda can be pulled off the consent agenda by any member of the board of directors or any person in this room.
Right, but nobody did.
Madam Chair, President, maybe we can, I'll work with our council to provide more clarity on this. I'm of the strong belief that the decision on pulling items off the consent calendar can only be taken by the board, because you're the only ones who are vested with the authority to adopt the agenda and change the form of the agenda. But at the same time, I understand the public oftentimes has a concern because you may have issues you want to comment on in the consent calendar. We've got to give the public the opportunity to voice those concerns and to bring that forward so that we can have those conversations when we really need to. But again, I don't know that's the best use of our time right now, but again, I'll bring that information forward with our council so that you feel like you are fully informed, and we can maybe provide an update at the next meeting.
We have one item.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's your beef with us changing the meeting?
Well, it's nothing personal.
No, that's what's on the agenda, changing the meeting.
That's not where I'm coming from.
It's a process.
Excuse me, but we're through with public comment. Are you
This is not a
addressing,
public comment about this particular issue, ma'am.
you want to talk about this particular issue?
Madam Chair, again, we haven't pulled anything off of consent to put it on discussion. Right now, there's consideration of the consent item. If the board desired to pull this item so that you could have that public discussion on it and just put it on the discussion counter, you can certainly do that, but that hasn't been taken yet.
Then the matter is resolved.
We just have to vote.
First and
Yeah, the motion's been seconded.
And it's been voted on.
all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Director Radaman, how do you vote? Director Radaman? We lost. Director Radaman?
There he is.
Oh, thank you. I take that as a, yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, point of order, please. I'd like to have a clarification. when we have a comment or question, do we address it to you or we have debate with other members on that table?
No,
So
Councilor.
we communicate with you and only you. And if any of the other people on that chair, they can communicate with you and you. Thank you, ma'am. That's our clarification. Thank you.
All right. Item number 4 at 1:20. Development of goals and objectives for general manager's performance at IBHI Management Consulting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, I appreciate it, and public and board, thank you for finding the time to do this. This is an important part, as you know, of your new relationship with your general manager. With 3 of you that are new board members since the general manager was hired, and all of that went on. It was way back in June, I believe, that we began, or maybe July, when we began the process. My firm was called upon to help the district board in recruiting and searching for a new general manager, and then that placement occurred, and the board changed, and even if the board had not changed, had not had new members, this is an important step for you as a collective boss to be clear with your employee about what their expectations are for the first year. What you come up with today, and in concert with your manager, you should have that discussion, a clear understanding. But what you come up with today is something that you can reference at the 1-year time frame when you do a performance evaluation. This was not part of my contract with you. I'm not charging you for this. I just know that I've done it enough now, I'm putting it into our contracts now, that I just believe it's such an important part of establishing this relationship, not just for the, not a haphazard way for the first year. The first year is very important in your relationship, but to be very clear about what things are going to be important to you as the collective boss for him in terms of your expectations and goals and objectives. So that's what we're going to spend some time today doing, yes.
Okay, Brent, I have a question. You'd mentioned that there's an evaluation at the 1-year period. Is that in a contract that was offered? And my comment is why don't we do that in a 6-month period of time?
You can. You can pretty much, you can evaluate his performance whenever you choose to do so. What's in his contract as negotiated, I believe it ended up, and I wasn't privy to the final negotiations, but I believe what's in there, Dave, isn't that right? Is every year you'll do at least an annual evaluation of performance.
But that does not say we cannot do one after 6 months, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, you could do it
Yes.
more
It's
often.
actually kind of a requirement on us to do one.
Madam Chair, Mr. Ives, could you move to the podium so that the camera can see you?
Didn't even think about
You're completely
it.
out of range.
Thank you so much. I'm just trying to get where everyone can hear me here, but thank you very much, I appreciate that. So, the process is important to you. First year could be whenever you choose to evaluate the performance. You could collectively agree on the first 100 days. You could agree on reviewing the performance at a 6-month period, or at least, though, at the annual. And that's basically what we're here to talk about. So I do talk a little bit about terms in here. But as I said, it's a crucial component of a good board GM relations over time. And one of the things we knew going into this, or what we were told coming in to this room and with the board, was that we needed to establish a long-term relationship here. If you find the right person to be your general manager, then it's best for the ratepayers, for all the constituents, for you, for them to establish a long-term relationship. And this is part of doing that. The second part of goals and objectives, especially the first year, is that oftentimes you wake up and a year's gone by and there was no clear performance expectations that came out of the collective boss, the board in whatever form it might be. And so that's why I try to the best of my ability, establish this and ask you all to work to get this going. And so congratulations that you're here today. This is an important thing. You may have already discussed some of your expectations. You may already have a good set of expectations. The idea is to document those expectations, file them. Everyone's clear about what the kinds of performance you're expecting. And it's part of the performance evaluation, as I said. And it's the last part of my relationship with you relative to that recruitment effort. And again, in this particular case, it wasn't part of your contract, but I feel strongly enough about this particular relationship that I really wanted to get off to a strong start, and I know this is an important part.
So let me ask you a few questions.
Excuse me,
I'm sorry.
We're working down where you'll,
Through you?
through me.
Okay.
Mr. Director Strange.
I'm sorry, thank you. And I think this communication just really brings to light my naivety in that, I've never done this stuff before. So I have a lot of questions, including, your background and involvement. I think that previous GMs may have been recruited from another or by a different agency.
That's true.
And yeah, my big thing is that I understand that the guidance and direction we want to give our GM is critical. And I think that's been the problem that this board has had in the past. And as a result, obviously, the turnover and the costs associated with that and everything else, and I do not want that to happen again. And as a result, I need to understand what my options or avenues in how we communicate collectively or individually or however that process is to happen with our general manager, our employee, so that we avoid the pitfalls that have happened in the past.
Just right. In absence of clear goals and objectives, there's ambiguity. And it's a lot of guessing, it's a lot of reading of the tea leaves. And in most cases, the association kind of works itself out. But in many cases, after the first year, the boards are left wanting, not having been clear, and maybe be going in this slight vector, and the manager's trying their best, but there's heading off in a slightly different vector, and you wake up a year and a half later and you're too far and the gap becomes a problem. That's why this particular component is so important after anyone hires. Anytime you hire a new employee, you should be clear about your expectations. The collective boss is maybe one of the other hardest parts of this, is that it's hard enough to find one good boss in your career, much less have 5 people agree on specific guidance for him. So it's really important for him to know exactly where it is you want to go. And so this is a really good use of your time. And Scott, you can hear me, right? I want to make sure you can hear me. I was going to test that earlier.
Yes, I can, Brett.
Great, Scott. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You just had to make that one cut real quick. And then
I just had
Star 6.
So, goals and objectives for the first year and or any portion thereof, 100 days, 6 months. So we were going to get to that, Director Strange. Thank you for the question.
Well, can I?
And
Yes.
I just kind of want to bring something up with just something that you said about, my boss or being the boss. How do I react? I think it's really important that at some point today we talk about the roles of individual board members and their interaction with the general manager, and then the collective board, which is really what we have to judge. What we should be able to do is come up with some criteria that the collective board, or at least the majority of the board, agrees upon, and that's the workload, the general workload that the general manager is that's gonna be his priority. And it's just really clear that we come up with something clear, because this is like, being a general manager of the water district is like fighting Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get hit. And then what happens after you get hit? You start to wander off, but it's up to the general manager, I believe, to sometimes tell the board, now wait a second, is this a change in priority? Because if it's a change in priority, I've got this list of things I'm supposed to be doing. You guys want to change my priority? Let's have a board meeting. Let's change it there and then move forward, because that is what happens more times than not, is one board member or a couple board members will derail the GM, and the workload will change, and then a majority of the board says, wait a second, we got the basics here, we don't think you're taking care of that, and so it's just, we got to give the general manager the the ability to come back to us and say, wait a second, can we go to the board and make sure that I have authority to do all this extra work? So, I mean, that's just something to keep, and I'm sure
Right.
Brent will cover on that, but that's really more than any other time. I think that's what's caused short-term management here, is just been that the board allows the general manager to sway, and the general manager allows the board to sway. And we gotta focus each other. I think that's the main thing. We gotta agree on the items that are important, and then there'll be other items. But the important items, if we wanna change them for the general manager, we gotta do it as a group. And I think that's, hopefully we'll talk about that.
Yeah, it's the group boss concept, and it just occurred to me that I hadn't done a very good introduction of myself to three of you, and I'm sorry. But I've done this organizational consulting work for special districts for 15 years. I've been part of the California Special Districts Association Governance Academy. I've taught that academy for about 15 years, having helped develop that curriculum. I've also, I work with special districts every week. I'm with 4 or 5 boards a week and different kinds of agencies, in helping them through this kind of thing, or strategic planning, or board dynamics, or anything else that generally has something to do with the board, and establishing good communications in the whole structure with the executive and above. I also served on your side of the dais. I was most recently, up until just this December 2014, the mayor of the city of Tracy, had been for 8 years, and been on that city council for 23. Spent a lot of time on your side of the dais. And I've seen over and over, whether it be with my clients or whether it be with in my own experience as a decision maker, how important it is to have clarity around such things as what Director Davidson was talking about, and such things as your goals and objectives as a collective group. Because what's important here is that while you are an elected official individually, unilaterally, you really have very little authority, and actually no authority to direct his expense or his time in terms of determining the use of public resources, which would be his time or his staff's time or anything else. But collectively is how you manage his performance, how you manage his workload, how you set the direction for the agency. And so that's a very important point, which means that you can't really go into his office and say, we really, really need this report. His response to you really should be, don't doubt it. Good idea. You know, I've got to take this back to the board. It'll probably be on a future agenda. We'll talk about it. Once the board so decides, we will run as fast as we can to get that done. There are certain nuances to that, naturally. There could be the little kind of, oh, let me get that for you right now stuff, or it won't take very long in terms of the dedication of the public resource by one particular request that would be too egregious, and so he would be able to do that. But in most cases, he's going to say, I've got to listen to the whole board, not just any one in particular. And that's one of the lessons that we have to learn, I think is important to learn as elected officials that sit on a board. Just what is our relationship with our manager? How should that be? How should that be carried out, and how should that be managed in terms of performance? In many cases, in the long run, what takes care of things like this and the specific priorities and direction that your manager will be going is usually handled in a strategic plan, meaning that there's clarity over a number of years strung together that meets an overall strategy, an overall vision. That vision and strategy generally starts with the board being clear about where they want to go, what kinds of things they'd like to be able to say in 5 years, for instance, is a good question. What would you like to be able to say about the district 5 years from now? And that kind of creates, in the collective of that, a collective vision by the board creates this direction, and then implementation comes from your staff that helps you get there. And that generally is his marching orders. You don't have that in place right now. You have a lot of ideas, a lot of needs, a lot of things that need to be raked into a pile and organized. and given to him and saying, at least in the first 6 months or the first year, these are the things we want you to accomplish. And then perhaps you will do some of the other kind of planning together in the future that'll clarify even longer term for him. And yourselves and the public will know, okay, this is the directional trend for this agency. These are the things that are priority. These are the things that are important. In essence, when you're done with a list of things today, you will see some of those, maybe for the first time of this board, having put their collective heads together on what are some of the big picture things that are going to be important to us in the future. So, any questions at this point? Otherwise, I can keep going.
Okay, I have a question. So that, I've been through the goal setting process before. We had, under Stewart, strategic planning. Is that what you're going to take us through, or no? All you're going to do is give us an overview, and it's going to be up to us to, again, come together for strategic planning.
That might be a
Or
future
goal setting.
That might be a future goal or
Right.
objective, perhaps.
Yes.
Mr. Ives, thank you for the
Dennis.
course 101 here. I come from middle-level management in large corporate settings, so you're not talking anything new here.
Nothing too foreign for you.
No.
But I think, Bertha, to answer your question, the strategic plan, developing a strategic plan could be one of the things that we want to add to the list.
One of the goals.
But what I think we're looking for today is a way to direct our general manager over the course of the next year. And I would assume that we would probably come up with at least want to have either a quarterly report or a semi-annual report to, the list of items that we bring forward. The general manager would probably want to come back to us, say, give us an update to keep, so we don't wait for 12 whole months to let all this stuff go by. But if we want to develop another strategic plan, probably reviewing the existing one we have would be a good first step.
That would be, yes,
But,
because
but those are items that we can, but we have to have something to be able to measure him by and direct him, so he's not wondering what the majority of the board wants him to do. Because that's where we'll go sideways, if individually we start directing him to do our own little things.
Yep.
And we don't have the authority to do that, so that's the other part.
So the process should allow for the GM to propose goals and objectives along with the board. This should be a discussion, not necessarily just a hand-down thing. I mean, I believe it at this point in time, he's been on the ground for a couple, 2.5, 3 months here. He may have some ideas to add to this discussion for his own performance. And so the relationship should not, between the two entities here, the collective board and the manager, shouldn't be overly formalized. If it's so overly formalized that you no longer communicate, then you're going to be in trouble. If you over-communicate and you make it too friendly, it's the typical supervisor-employer relationship. If you make it too friendly, and then it can have its problems too. But you shouldn't over-formalize it. That's what usually happens, unfortunately. And so it should be a relationship that has very, very similar goals in mind. And that's what's best for the mission of this agency that the public has handed you as stewards of that mission. Okay, so it should be clear enough to evaluate at a proper future date, whatever that might be. Both you and the GM should have clarity and agree on those goals and objectives, and they should be documented, filed, and revisited at the time when you're going to do a formal performance evaluation. When we started the effort of the recruitment, I led the board through a process of what kinds of things are going to be important out in the future, what kinds of things are going to be really the skills, knowledge, ability, experience of your next general manager, so that when we are out there evaluating a candidate pool, that we can be sorting on those kinds of things. And so I took some notes way back when we started that, and so there are a couple of things. Clarity about capital improvement progress. Please clarify that for us. Make sure that whoever gets this job can do that, can clarify that whole capital improvement process and program. Everyone has clarity and understanding. The public can understand it, the board can understand it, the staff can understand it, and so forth. Good at optimizing the staff resource. One of the assets that you have decided to use the public's money on is the human capital. That optimizing that asset is something you should be clear about to your manager, because that's one of the biggest assets you have. You have plants, and in other words, you have facilities, you have equipment, you have money, and you have people, those 4 asset classes. And basically what boards are saying, without saying it many times, is go out and optimize each of those relative to the mission of this organization. So one of those in particular, though, was the staff resource. The board at the time wasn't completely sure that was ever fully optimized. And so find somebody who can do that. Demonstrate a calm demeanor during meetings and during any controversy. Be ethical, be relational, and able and willing to connect with our community, with this community. That was a big one. Someone who's willing to do that. Now, this isn't your set of goals and objectives, although it could be striking some tones with you. Strong communications with the board. Where are we going, how, and why? Listen to the board and respond to the board members. The communication, at least with one experience in the past, was less than ideal in terms of communication. I always tell new general manager, you can't over-communicate with your board, but communicate with them evenly. No one board member is any different than the other in terms of strata. The board in policy has delegated certain amount of authority and responsibility to the board president, but that's all by virtue of policy. Other than that, those small little set of things that a board president or a mayor can do, everyone up there is absolutely the same and alike. So everyone gets the same information. That's just GM 101, and I know David knows that real well. So you can't over communicate. But that was a lack, or that was a problem in the past. Be good with staff, keep morale high, make sure board knows staffing needs and plans. Again, this is really about communications, both with your staff and being able to manage staff in a very productive and highly productive way. And it also has to do with making sure that you all know how he's optimizing that resource. And then be a good planner with us for the future so we can have a singular agenda. That is not an easy, that term, singular agenda, is very, very difficult to assume. And in fact, we all know that each elected board member has their set of things that they care about, probably a little more. They have their set of passions and interests that they bring, and experience and skills that they bring to the dais. But how it all gets meshed together is the nuance of how we do it well. If you can do that well, if you can have that moment, those times, that process that puts your collective experiences and perspectives together to make a great kind of vision or singular agenda, then you've got a thing of beauty, and then there's clarity for staff as they're moving forward. So, those were just my notes from when the search began. So, in terms of goals and objectives, first we need to talk about the term. Do you want to set some 6-month and 1 years, or 100-day and 1 years? He's already probably got 100 days already, David, don't you?
2 months.
You're pushing it, okay, so you're getting close. But the board needs to decide on that, so I'm gonna have to write some things down. I'll write it to the degree that the public can see it, but you know how that goes, guys, so you might need to move. So, board, this is where I need you to kind of talk about it. 6 months was thrown out by Director Strange.
In the past with my work, on initial employees, it was a 90-day review, then a 6-month review, as you know, and then a 1-year review. We didn't do the 9-month review, and then it was every 6 months thereafter. That first initial period is critical, that first 90 days is critical to be sure that the person and you mesh well and everybody has their feet on the ground with what's going on. So I would really strongly recommend that there be an initial 90-day review and then moving forward.
Well, that would take place in about a month here.
That's correct.
Based on, what are we gonna base it on?
Initially,
The original,
Yeah,
the first one.
yeah.
And remember, those reviews don't have to be overly formal. They will be closed sessions, first of all. Now, if there's any action that comes out of it, for instance, if there were a salary action, any kind of compensation action, or not action, but any nod or any assertion toward any kind of action, that would always come in the open session. But the specific of the performances between you two of an individual employee. So the 90-day evaluation could be just a meeting, really. Doesn't even have to be really terribly well documented. It's just David asking you, how am I doing? And you all being able to tell him. How does that fit with everyone?
Well, I mean, I'm fine with that, but I think it's really important, particularly in the initial one, it's gotta be a two-way street. You know, the board's gotta recognize that we may not be giving the general manager everything he needs to accomplish stuff, particularly in the beginning. I think that, I think he will probably have as much to ask of us as we will to ask of him, because he's, I believe, finally starting to get a grasp of our facilities and our staff. And I mean, it may very well come at these meetings where he's going to direct us to put things on the agenda so he can start taking action on things that he thinks are critical. So that's why I don't want to get super specific here early on the early evaluations. I'm happy to do meetings you want, but I just think we need to recognize it's got to be two ways.
In the early evaluation, I always made it a point as a manager to ask the question, how can I help you to do your job better? That's really where we need to be at, is the personalities, are they meshing? Do we have a common goal in mind? And where you feel that you have some weaknesses, are we able to work those through? So it is a very simple and more informal process, but it still is something that needs to be done if you're going to get your feet on the ground right.
And again, the word evaluation is kind of a,
Yeah.
It could be a 90-day performance discussion. It doesn't have to be an evaluation, it's something that, and let's hear what David, how he thinks. I mean, it might scare him to death.
Well,
Remember, he's always only 3 votes
yeah,
away.
let's.
yeah, Madam President, I have a comment, and that comment is that I feel uneasy and awkward if I was to go in and evaluate somebody prior to being able to establish goals and objectives.
That's why I said the word evaluation is kind of a damper on it.
Yeah. So what I would like to do or propose is that we work on goals and objectives. I don't mind, and in fact, I would support getting together in a 90-day period and having, discussions of, how comfortable are you, how are things going, and as the other directors have said, what can we do to help, support what you're doing. But at the same time, I feel it's most important to really focus on goals and objectives as a board first.
I'm content with that. I think that had everybody been on board, from the beginning, I think we would have probably set a criteria like that. But I think, you guys are still getting to know what staff and facilities and everything. I kind of want to go along with Terry's deal. I think that the evaluation of the communication that Director Mills wants to have, we're kind of doing that right now. And so, I mean, we're actually having a communication about what we're going to evaluate on. And so maybe that can take place, and then we'll have a 6-month evaluation, which is just a preliminary of the 12-month required annual review. So, I mean, I'm content with going either way, but I kind of feel like we're doing the thing that Mr. Mills wants to do. And we were talking about a month from now. I mean, we're kind of doing it right now, and I think that, I think we're doing exactly what everybody wants. It's just we're calling it something different.
What does Scott have to say? Scott?
Star 6.
Scott, are you with us?
Oh, yes, I think it'd be very, very difficult to evaluate our general manager without first setting these objectives and having something set to evaluate them on. I agree with Bertha's comment that we haven't set our, the standard on which we're going to evaluate them, and the word evaluation is going to be an important part of that. I think a 6 month might even be a little early, with everybody getting to know the district and how things work. It might not even be fair, and the general manager is just barely getting his feet wet here. 2 months have already passed, but a 6 month discussion and then a 12-month evaluation is what I would recommend and like to see.
Director Underhill? I think it's important that we don't have to, it doesn't have to be from the day he started. It could be from now.
Madam Chair, could we hear, let's see what David's thinking over there.
Well, I think actually, Director Davidson, what you just proposed, I think makes a lot of sense. I think if I see the 90-day as a check-in. It's kind of like we've, particularly if we have goals and objectives, we've already got that defined. But it's kind of a ground truthing. Okay, what are you experiencing in your initial efforts to implement these goals and objectives, and what do we need to be doing? What do we, what did we not see, or what are, should we be refining our focus a little more, or just like you said, Director Mills, what is it that we can provide to help make that happen? Maybe I've already start to gel some ideas on what I should be bringing to the board, and if you guys have a sense that you're in agreement with that. So I'm the goal and objective on communication, that's just my personality, and I would much rather know earlier than later if I'm doing anything that seems to be off track with what the desires of the board are. I think the really important thing here is that I get clear, consistent direction from the board, and because I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to advance the goals and objectives as defined by this board. So if that helps with it, I'm all for it, and I think it probably would. So I would say a 90-day check-in, 6 months, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's time to measure and see how I'm doing. Although honestly, I think part of the measurement should be happening along the way as we come to the board. I mean, part of what ultimately this would be in the strategic plan, but I would love to have, when we're bringing items to this board, I can cite to those, we're bringing this to you because your goal and objective number 3, as we collectively determine, are advanced by this item. I mean, that's the kind of direction I've been in being that focused on our work. I want to get to that point. So I think that's going to be happening in the interim as well. So hopefully no surprises when we come in at 90 or six months or even a year.
That's a very important term. There should be no surprises. You ought to have the kind of relationship where things don't get to the point where they're in trouble. You can see them coming. You anticipate them. We're proactive. We communicate. That's what helps the whole public process work. Absent that, it comes apart in so many different ways. It's incredible. And it's good for my business because I tend to get called when that happens, but it's not a good thing when I get there. It's usually lack of communication in some way. And so this is such an opportunity, but let's try to clarify what we want the first year process to look like, okay? So what's really on the table here? First year process. The 90-day check-in, when would that actually be? Or the 90-day discussion is all it is?
Communication, I still think that we're kind of doing that. So the 90-day thing is, I mean, depending on from now, I'm fine with that. But if it's 10 days from now, 2 weeks from now, I don't think that's gonna, because I'm not positive we're gonna accomplish this today. I still think we may have to have another discussion about this, about what the board's priorities are, so.
Well, yeah, that was what I was gonna say. We could go 90 days from today, or because we're into that right now.
I would like a commitment prior to setting however day in the future that we have the opportunity to first discuss our goals and objectives and
But
whatnot.
that's going to be another process, so we're.
No, that's the process we're in right now.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just not the strategic, you're not doing a strategic plan here. You're doing a, what can we expect, what can we hope to clarify in terms of our expected performance from our manager in the first year? And we're gonna.
It's very general, they're very general terms, but we're gonna go, in a year from now, we're gonna go through a list of 5 or 6 things, you know, and like, for instance, you know, I always think the primary focus of our job is to make sure that we provide, you know, water and sewer service. I mean, that's the basic. Our staff is supposed to do that above and beyond anything else. You know, provide safe drinking water and recycled effluent in a safe, cost-effective manner. Just what our mission statement says. That's always number one for me. That's the biggest thing I'm going to judge this guy on, making sure that operations runs. You know, and so that's like an item that I'll be asking for. And then, you know, it's like, I know everybody wants to get their hands around the capital improvement, prioritizing it. Is it working? Did we prioritize it? Did the former general manager prioritize it? That can be another action item that we're gonna say, well, have you given us all the information we need to understand the capital improvement program? Those are just a couple things that we can kind of add to the list. And then 6 months and then 12 months from now, we can go each item and say, is operations running smoothly? Do you have a handle on that? Yes or no? Capital improvements, have you given the board everything they need to know? Do we need to reorganize capital improvements? Those are some of the things that I'm looking at. That's just a couple of them, but I'm sure you guys have your own, but.
Madam President, and Brent, maybe this is an idea that would work. I could see, as soon as the goals and objectives are defined, I would like to immediately spend some time on trying to think about what exactly would be my work plan to implement that. So I would like to, under each of those, say if it's 5 big goals, I would like to have, you know, maybe it's 5 items under each one of those that I can tangibly and measurably achieve something of meaningful progress under that. And then I think that once I have that in hand, that would be a really important time to check in with the board and say, okay, is this, are we on the same page, or did you think it was something else? Because as we launch into that, I want to make sure that, again, we're on the same page.
This is kind of a
Madam
little,
President?
go ahead.
yes, Scott.
I have at the class that I'm at, which is Leadership Academy here for the California Special District Academy, or California Special District Association. And actually, Brett taught here on Monday and Tuesday and did a fantastic job. And thank you again, Brett, for your lessons. One of the things that we got in the booklet was some sample manager reviews. And just from going through here, the ones that I'm looking at here, there are 5 that are pretty general and pretty broad that I think would fit, might fit for us. I just want to throw those out for discussion. Number 1 is the management of the organization. Number 2 is financial management. And again, there could be subsets and categories, and as Director Davidson did point out, the capital improvement plan, and that could be a subpart of financial management along with a few other things. So, and whatever we decide to throw in. And number 3 would be community relations. 4, professional growth and development of the general manager. And then number 5 is board relations. I just want to throw those out for discussion. All right, thank you.
I think we're still trying to get a grasp of we're not at the goal point yet. We're more at the timing point. We still got to resolve that. I think, and my recommendation is that after we develop goals and objective, general goals and objective, I like the idea of you coming back to us at that time with a work plan for our review. And then we have a 6-month review after that period, and then a 12-month review to follow.
As I was going to say, again, from my background, I'm just so baffled by all of this, that he would be hired, or you'd have a general manager hired, without him knowing what the goals and objectives are, without having them clearly defined. That speaks to the question that I asked you months ago, about what would be your initial short-term goals, et cetera, and you said that's a good question. And now I understand why that you responded the way you did. I wouldn't have done it this way in a million years in business, never. To hire somebody, they need to have a clear outline before they even put their name on the dotted line, that this is what is expected of them, and this is the performance metrics that we will be measuring you by, and only then will you say, yes or no, I'll do that. So I just wanted to bring the point out. This is just beyond the pale for me to understand why we're talking about it so many months after the fact.
I can say that the former board did give me direction to try to do some initial sorting of candidates and try to find candidates that generally met the criteria that were expected and the kinds of needs that this agency was going to need. But the specificity of those were not quite there yet. What we did was we tried to find a professional that was going to be able to handle whatever you throw at them. Now,
And regardless, we are where we are.
that's why we're here, though. You're right, Director Mills, that's exactly why we're here, to try to clarify and begin that process that may not have been as clear as it could have been before.
And Madam Chair, but just on that note, I don't think, Director Mills, I don't think any of the things that could end up in the goals and objectives or work plan would be a surprise to me. I mean, these are common to the industry. It's common to agencies like ours that are covering vast geographic areas with pretty small staff. I think that the thing that has been maybe a surprise is the sheer volume of issues to deal with. And really, that's where I need the leadership, the guidance from the board on setting the priorities, because we could spend the rest of the daylight hours having Larry probably catalog all of the issues that somebody would think are tier 1 priority issues, and there's just no way we can get done even a fraction of that, so.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize what we're asking the general manager to do is to direct a staff that's really too small for the workload, to do the workload that we want, plus the extra things that we think are important to us.
And you're going to have to think higher level here, because you can't, as is pointed out, if you get down in the weeds too far, first of all, that may be too far to be in the weeds anyway, that's not your role. What you want out of your executive is results and achievements.
That's right.
How they get that done within, of course, legal and commonly professional expectations is really left to them. You want results and achievements. But he's got to know which results and achievements you want. And so,
Can we agree to the time frame, though?
yeah, let's agree to the time frame, please. What I thought I heard and what kind of normalizes this is it looks like at the 6-month period, you're going to be basically almost 90 days out from here. So that would, but it depends on where you want to start. But the contract and the expectation is generally the year starts at beginning of employment. Now, if you want to agree, then you might go a little further than that to have the first annual performance evaluation. Or you could, 3 months out, you could set some goals and objectives for the full year and have a report on how on the approach and the progress in about 4 months from now. That could be one of the ways you could get through this.
Well, if complying with the contract is the critical issue, then let's just split it down the middle. And we'll meet the contractual obligation, but somewhere between now and then, and I'd say somewhere in the middle, we should do the big picture review. And then also, we're gonna develop goals and objectives as soon as we can, and then he can give us his request for action which is kind of what Dennis was wanting to do, a earlier review, kind of meets all 3 of those deadlines. That's my request.
So can we agree to do an annual performance evaluation, or at least be in the middle of that when his 1-year contract date strikes?
You mean do a semi-annual?
No, we'll just talk about the annual right now. If we can agree with that, then we can break it down.
Yes, we will comply with this contract.
1 year anniversary. So at the 4 months from now would be 6 months into his contract. Would you be comfortable, Dave, with reporting relative to the, presuming we can get some goals and objectives on paper, would you be comfortable with reporting in 4 months on progress and your perspective on the goals and objectives?
You bet. And in fact, I think a lot of, a lot of this will be thought out probably as part of the budget development process as well. Some of these things will. So there could be quite a bit for us to check in on.
And your start date was December?
December 1st.
Yeah, so this is going to be December 1st. And this is going to be on or about July 1st. Performance evaluation report.
No, it'd be June 1st.
About June 1st.
June 1st, sir.
Okay, that's true.
It's all right.
No, that's good. Performance evaluation report. So now we've got two, along with what you're doing today, you've got two other times when you can roll over this year and kind of incrementally ramp it up. And so if that's going to be your process this year, then now we get to the point of, at the 1 year, what kinds of expectations would you like to provide for your manager? And then who would in turn, in 4 months from now, report on the progress of those? Does that make sense?
Say that again.
You're basically, what are what those 1 year goals and objectives?
Okay.
So what would, be careful not to expect too much. Where is clarity, however, needed about a year from now, about the December 1st time frame? What would the GM propose as needs determined thus far? He may have some ideas as well, is what I'm saying. And then what do board members know they will want to accomplish or substantially completed within this first year? And a lot of it may be plans, directions, reports, those kinds of things are all right. But you shouldn't have so much that is just the list could go on and on if you get too deep into the weeds on this. See, what Scott was saying was big picture employee relations, operations, financials. That's where you would start.
Well, and I think it's,
Come back.
I think it's important that we do start like that, because the one thing that we have to recognize is that we're operating under a budget that has work-related items that are being accomplished now. And if we have specific items that we want to, that are gonna cost money, then we're gonna need to adjust the budget. So, I mean, depending on how specific we are, sometimes we can create other problems. Something else may not get done. So I think a lot of our goals and objectives will probably follow into that, and then we'll get this report back from him about the work-related items. Many of those will be budget items, asking for money to do these things. So we have to recognize that there's a chain of events that are going to occur after we make requests, and it may be we can't do anything until budget happens.
Well, and I see something else. I see a very unique situation faced with water supply and droughts, 4 years of droughts, and a Proposition 1 that's right, coming up right in front of us that will allow us to really, meet those demands and get free money, kind of a thing. And so for me, that's a real priority in the district that I represent right now.
Sure.
That maybe ought to have a little sidebar to it.
What about the fact that it's going to take us 2 years to do anything
With Prop 1.
with Prop 1?
Yeah.
That's the other side of it.
Right. I'd like to agree with Director Davidson that the budget is the primary point here, and that our rates are set based on that budget, and our ability to meet our goals is relationship to that budget. So everything revolves around whether or not we set a budget that is workable and one that, we can function in without creating an undue hardship to our ratepayers. So. the
Our action,
budget is
you're
the
right,
primary-
our action items have to be
Revolve
reflected
around that.
in the budget.
Madam
correct.
Chair, I might just point out that they're already in the budget process. They're already putting together the kinds of things necessary to support an agreed-upon budget by July 1st. And so one of the expectations for the first year would absolutely be the appropriateness of the budget, but also on time. I mean, he knows that.
Yeah.
He's done this before.
Well-
They're already working on it, but it's a fair expectation. Let us be clear about this with you, General Manager, that we expect a budget process and to be